basic encryption and your basic privacy. And look, I understand these videos are not the most popular on my channel, I get it, but I think it's always something worth fighting for. So one of the things that I have set up in my local system right now is a Signal server. So I don't even like to use Signal on itself. Because I have a server in my basement, I can basically host my own iteration of Signal and basically use this to communicate to the people around me. So everyone in my office, everyone in my business life, everyone in my personal life can basically use that server and enjoy true privacy and true anonymity. And it's not difficult for you to set this up in your own Docker container and then basically route your actual mobile applications to that server. It's not really difficult whatsoever. Look, at the end of the day, governments like to use phrasing like this to make this shit more palatable. But at the end of the day, let's call it what it is, an attack on your basic human rights and freedoms and privacy. And that's something that I think is always worth fighting for and advocating for, okay? Because everyone in the world can argue and at least get together on the idea of us living some sort of privacy, at least having some modicum of it in our life. Again, it goes back to when I cover the deep web. The deep web videos were not just a video series that, obviously was, designed to just show you the deep web. It was there to demystify this thing that governments would use to constantly say illegal criminals are using it. Yeah, that's true. Illegal criminals do use the deep web. But there's a lot of people that use this technology like journalists, and I'll say this a million times, to spread information in a safe manner where, their governments or people in their countries won't persecute them, whether legally or by putting a bullet in their head. And the same with these chat services right now. Look, I don't like a lot of the channels that I go to on Telegram when I'm looking at scammers and whatnot. But am I going to sit down on a train and say, yeah, let's just destroy all of it because of the bad actors that exist? Bad actors that are already still being fought against in it's a never-ending battle. And people know it's a never-ending battle. Politicians are trying to conflate it as if, hey, listen, let us surveillance, let us stop criminal. If the government was allowed a backdoor today into any of these services or tech agencies, the spread of child exploitation would not change one bit whatsoever. What would change is that the privacy that you have by using some of these services would be gone in a heartbeat. And the governments, they want that. They want the ability to spy and surveil you to no end. They want to rip away every single ounce of your privacy until every single aspect of your life can be monitored, can be controlled, and you have to watch whatever you say to anybody, even in a private channel. And I think it's something that is really, really scary to see that we're heading towards. And unfortunately, if you don't take a stand now, you're going to lose it forever, because that's just where we're getting to. Once the government regulates it, that's how these systems are going to be designed, and unfortunately, that's where we're at. It's one of the reasons why I fight against things like the TikTok ban, for instance, right? Like, I might not be a TikTok user, and I might even think that China spies on people with TikTok. I even think TikTok is a giant AI attack on the brains of American children. But do I think that we should be banning any form of application that can be used to communicate with each other? Absolutely not. If you lose that, you're no more freer than the most totalitarianist regime that exists in the scariest parts of the world. But yeah, let me know what you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, in the comment section. I wanted to really talk about this because, as you all know, I'm a channel that focuses on privacy, computer safety, and security, and this is, without a doubt, one of the most important battles worth fighting. Anyways, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I'm addicted to No Man's Sky, so I'm probably going to get finished on that. I think I definitely should make a video on that this week, because I got to at least turn this addiction into something meaningful. Anyways, I am out.
On your own, like everybody has to live with roommates.
Well, now a new poll finds as more New Yorkers struggle with rising food prices, they are cutting back on healthy foods.
I mean, you want to eat healthy, but the economy is not allowing for that.
A new survey shows 85% of New Yorkers say the cost of food is rising faster than their income, and nearly half of New Yorkers say it's much harder to afford groceries now.
The number of buy now, pay later loans increased nearly 1,100%. That rapid growth has some analysts concerned because where there are loans, there's debt. But exactly how much debt is still unclear.
With renters squeezed so tightly, there is yet another cost.
It also is a detriment to the city's overall economic stability because people don't have money to spend on anything but housing.
And it doesn't matter if they make $30,000 or $100,000. This is something felt by New Yorkers of all incomes.
Is moving to New York worth it? That's the question many people are now asking. But what nobody's talking about is that moving here, that's one thing. Remaining here for any length of time, that's completely different. Which is why so many people are now digging themselves a financial hole by borrowing money. A sad reality many middle-income families who once felt prosperous in the Empire State are now being faced with. And that's because this is now officially the least affordable place you could possibly live in America, with homes costing millions of dollars to own and thousands of dollars to rent, even though they are some of the smallest apartments anywhere on the planet. But the cost of living, that's just the first problem facing most people, because if you've got a cushy job and a big skyscraper making over $100,000, that might not matter to you so much. However, New York's recent job growth has been slanted towards the lower end of the economic ladder, with lots of openings for positions at businesses and with the government, which sadly don't pay people enough money to actually live here in any meaningful capacity. Especially when the costs of housing aren't the only problem people are facing, it's the prices of everything that are rising. And grocery store milk is so expensive, it's gonna make your eyes pop out of your head. However, the real reason we're now seeing families dig themselves into financial pits they cannot escape from is because New York's affordability crisis has gone on for way too long. So long, in fact, that people are either skipping their bills entirely or turning to things like buy now, pay later that are a short-term fix for a long-term problem. And it's all because the city we live in, which claims to be looking out for the little guy, actually isn't. And the problems we're talking about here are so deep that when individuals take on extra debt just to try and stay in the city, it could affect all of us in ways nobody's ready to imagine. Okay, this might be a small place, but it's also the cheapest 3-bedroom in town, and the rent is $59.95 a month, so about $2,000 per person. And to live here, each roommate's gonna have to be making $80,000 a year. But you know what's gonna happen here? The person that rents this, they're gonna be somebody that can likely barely afford to rent it as is. Now, the hope is that income goes up, but if incomes don't rise that fast, whoever comes in could be in some sort of a trap, so you have to really be careful. And either way, this is a lot of money for most people, many of whom are essentially living paycheck to paycheck. And now some are even going into debt to afford regular weekly expenses, which is a massive trap. Bad idea. Because having to pay off debts for things you need on a regular weekly basis is just gonna dig into a financial hole, which is gonna be so tough to get out of, some people might find themselves trapped financially in a place they can't afford. And as you're about to see, that could end up spelling disaster, not just for you, but also for the city's entire economy.
50% is a high percentage. The cost of renting in New York is outpacing the income of New Yorkers so dramatically that one group is ringing the alarm, finding 1 in 3 people in the city are paying more than half their income to rent. The data, bad, but not a surprise.
So it's important to understand that the landlord, he's not gonna rent you this apartment if he doesn't think that you can afford it. But 1 out of every 3 New Yorkers is already spending half their income in rent. And the only way that's possible is if people move into places they can afford at first, but then their income just doesn't keep pace with the rent increases. And since in New York, you don't get re-qualified from year to year to stay in the place most of the time, people end up finding themselves imprisoned financially in a small apartment. And that's because, according to the federal government, if you spend more than 30% of your income on rent, you're what is considered rent burdened. And people who are rent burdened tend to have issues with sudden expenses when they come up. Maybe like a sudden medical expense or a car repair. Hopefully you don't have a car if you're trying to live in a New York apartment, but you get the idea. If something comes up and it's above what you budgeted for and you don't have the money for the budget you already have, That could be bad.
A financial struggle that leads to some tough decisions, passing up on essentials like food, healthcare, and education.
Pretty hard to even move out and look for a place on your own. Like, everybody has to live with roommates.
CSSNY says with renters squeezed.
So privacy, that's one of the sacrifices many people are making. There's nothing wrong with living with roommates, and it makes sense that people are willing to give up having the privacy of a one bedroom that's $5,000 when a place like this is $59.95. You could save a lot of money, but the dream of ever living on your own might be unattainable for a lot of people. But it's even more than that, because you just heard how grocery bills, medical bills, pretty much anything and everything is way more expensive than it used to be. And for that reason, you've now got people taking on extra forms of employment, which they need to continue living in New York. And since the jobs aren't paying enough and people are working second and sometimes even third jobs if they're incorporating gig work along with like a salaried position, this is gonna have effects on our city that experts and city leaders have missed, and they're not good effects.
There is yet another cost.
It also is a detriment to the city's overall economic stability because people don't have money to spend on anything but housing.
The good news is that the experts say there is a clear solution to this, and that is the creation of affordable housing. But the bad news is they...
Okay. Yeah, we keep hearing about that. Affordable housing. But it's not gonna happen. If it were to happen, places would be more affordable. This would have happened a long time ago. But the fact that there's no affordable housing leads us to a new crisis. And that crisis is that if you're spending everything you have on rent, you really have no money left for the rest of the economy. So all of the businesses, all of the things here that are required for the city to function also start suffering. And if everyone's trying to survive in the gig economy, but people stop ordering from restaurants and start cooking all their meals at home, what do you think's gonna happen to all those local restaurants? They're gonna stop getting orders, they're gonna shut down. And the same thing goes for every other type of employment that we've got here. If you work at like a clothing store, but people are cutting back spending on things like clothing, shoes, and whatnot, those items are gonna stay on the shelf. Your job isn't really gonna have a purpose because there aren't any customers, but you need that job to stay in your apartment like this. It's a slippery slope of a hamster wheel. These are the consequences that we're in because these are the only apartments that the city's gonna allow us to have, the ones that we already have. But that brings us to the next set of major consequences that we're looking at here. One of those is crime. You've got people committing crime. They steal from stores, resell those items online, boom, that's a job, and there's customers because your items are cheaper than your competitors because all your items are stolen. But that's not all. Because the law-abiding, they're not gonna go and do something like that. No, they're gonna do the right thing. They're gonna try to pay everything in an honest way. And because our economy isn't really doing that great, companies have come up with creative ways to help us spend money that we don't have. Think credit cards, but worse. Talking about these buy now, pay later schemes. Yes, these types of programs might help you buy supplies for your bathroom, like toothpaste, paper towel, toilet paper, and they're helpful to people who need them to try and stay ahead of a rising cost curve with their rent that's higher than their income. But as you're about to see, these new types of micro-lending schemes might be doing more harm than good. However, many people living in tiny apartments right now are relying on them, and so are the businesses that need to sell to people who don't have the money to buy the products. And these new programs, they're growing so rapidly that they're creating a new type of debt crisis that the country's never seen before. And experts are saying this could be so bad it could cause the entire economy to collapse.